We're very happy to have with us today Scott Tarulli and an exceptional guitarist, educator. If there's a guitarist that who you can say can play all styles and play them all at such a masterful level, it would be Scott. Scott's been teaching at Berklee College of Music for the last 25 years, he told me, and he's toured the world and he has several records out, and he's performed with people from Steve Gadd all the way to Alicia Keys. So, Scott, thanks so much for coming on today.
Well, thanks for having me. It's great to see you, man.
Yeah, you know what? We were just talking before this, and we said you thought the last time you saw me was 10 years ago, but it was almost 17. It's crazy.
I know. I don't know where time goes, but it's so great to see you, man.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you a little introduction on how I got introduced to your music was aside from the class, I saw a video of you playing the Jeff Beck tune on YouTube, Scatterbrain, and just the way you played, I said, "Oh, this is someone I definitely want to, learn from because it was just such a, unique way of playing so many styles merged together and made you your voice." And that's actually could be a great place to start. Because as improvisers, we're always trying to get, you know, our own sound or find our own voice.
Yeah.
So, was there a certain point for you where you said, okay, I think I've sort of found it now? Maybe something shifted and you felt more like you had, found your own voice as a improviser?
God, that's a really great question because I've asked other musicians that question too. Musicians that I clearly like, take example like Eric Johnson. When you think of Eric Johnson, you can name that player in one note. And I guess it turns out he doesn't think he has a unique voice. Like he feels like he's searching for it. So because I've always been kind of obsessed with it. Like early on when I started like touring right out of college in my early 20s, I deliberately copied players because I knew if I copied, say, Robin Ford or whoever, I'd be accepted. I would sound good. If it's like if I go out on a gig and I can nail this kind of playing, and for me, this is a great topic because for me, it was a scary thing to start stepping into sounding like me, and that um, I think with artists, there's a few types that it doesn't occur to them. Like I would love to ask someone like Madison Cunningham. I really love her playing, but she's a unique, completely unique. But I mean, she might say it just came out that way.
I mean, you said you were trying to copy certain players, and I think that's, something we all transcribe and try to figure out what other people are doing. Was there like a conscious decision where you said, I need to step outside of the box now and create, my own way of approaching the guitar that's just unique to me? Was it, or is it something that just kind of evolved naturally?
Well, I there's a good distinction you have there. So early on, it was imitation.
Hmm.
And then after a while, I started to treat it as influence. There's a difference between imitating and influence. So I still transcribe, like I love transcribing later John Coltrane or Herbie Hancock. And the reason is mostly their time or seeing new technical possibilities. So I'm someone that I'll get a transcription up to tempo, and if I don't play it for a week, I completely forget it, which is fine. But I think when I started, I had an EP out when I was 19, and I was pretty much back then when I was 19, it was pretty much like Randy Rhoads, Satriani, Vi, Vivian Campbell, all those people from like, my high school years. And I didn't really think about it, but I just kind of wrote something. It sounded very Satriani-esque, everybody told me, which was fine. Um, but I was mostly touring as a side musician in my 20s, which I loved. I got to go tour around. But when I started writing for my first real album, I had time to take these concepts I learned and organize them in a way that sounded right to me. But it was a scary process because I don't know if anybody else listening ever has this or had it. I would write something and I would be so clouded by, are people going to accept this? Is this hip enough? Or is this sound too heady, or does this sound, and all of these voices started going in my head about, and I became paralyzed, right? So for me, it was very difficult, and I feel like it was deliberate. Um, but it's funny you say that. I think I've been really working on. I've been practicing completely different the last couple of years, and I did a gig the other night, and I listened to it, and I said, "There's wait, I think there's something there. I think something's starting to happen with the time, with the phrasing, with, just the touch, just like the touch in everything." And so I could talk about it forever, and
Would you
and
say
I won't.
that you're very critical or have been of yourself in the past?
Oh, exceptionally. I
Yeah.
mean,
Are you
and the
kind of
thing,
at peace with that now? Is maybe you've gotten a little bit older, or is it, it's always kind of, I mean, obviously you always want to play as well as you can and evolve as a player, but I think maybe when you're a little younger, it's like that voice. I mean, are you more at peace with it now as you've gotten older?
another great question. I was thinking about this last night, and I can't decide if it's worse. Or, I mean, well, let's say the critique is worse, but I don't feel as bad about it, if
Okay.
that makes. So I'll go, that was just so when I was younger, if I had a bad night, it would ruin. I mean, I couldn't do anything. Like sometimes I didn't want to touch the guitar for 2 days. It was like I thought it was that bad. Now it's it was awful, but I feel like the reason the blow's not as hard, even though I'm thinking it, is because I realize now that I'll give myself maybe 2 gigs a year where I think I play okay, right? And so just so I have the you did okay thing, it's like okay, now I can say I'm hypercritical about myself, but also it was a bad night, or I didn't reach something, or I had this, so that I can understand why more, where before it was kind of a mystery when I
Well,
was younger.
it sounds to me, the next question I was going to ask you was what success means to you, but I kind of
Oh
feel like
yeah.
the answer might be for you to, I mean, we're our own worst critics sometimes, but I feel like, you're talking pretty strongly about that. But what does success mean to you at this point as a professional musician?
You know, I've actually interviewed a lot of people about this because success is an interesting,
Well, it's personalized, right?
it's very personalized, and everybody has a different, like you'll see people that they think success is they got X amount of streams, or they think success is I hit 1 million followers. And that's great. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. However, if I got 1 million followers, I wouldn't see that as a success.
Yeah, I mean, the way I define my success at this point is, it used to be like playing in certain venues, but now it's just like
Yeah.
I kind of have a better understanding about how to improvise, and like I feel like I can listen. I feel like I'm a more experienced. I just have a gauge on it. That to me is the success. So, would you say yours is, anything along those lines?
There's two things. There's I'm trying to write down what to be grateful now because I'm older now. There's a lot of dreams I had when I was younger that just never happened, right? I don't know if you remember the first time you picked up the instrument. For me, it was 10 or 11 years old, and I was already like starstruck. I was already looking at when I was younger, like they play all summer, they play like concerts of bands that were on tour at like 11 every night. They had this thing called the Blue Jean Network or the Westwood One Network. And I used to see these bands, and back then it was great. It was raw. I mean, there was no auto tune, there was no doctoring. It was just like you heard the show for better or for worse. And I was kind of obsessed with that moment and the sound of a guitar. So I have two things going on about success. One is, well, I have a few things. One is, all right, the fact that I noticed the other night, I don't think I played perfectly at all, but I saw some things start to emerge that I thought I may be onto something about my sound a little deeper. So that was a success. Although if you said like, was that your best performance? I would say no. Don't put that out on an album. The other one is I go back and forth, and I can still say I'm frustrated. At this point, I would love to get called for a gig like in Snarky Puppy, or tour and play very dedicated music. It doesn't have to be Snarky Puppy, but a lot of like I like to go on the road. Um, I've been on the road, but not in that sense. Like, if Don Henley were to call, that would be mind blowing. So those are some of the goals that never happened. Right now, I have this list where it's okay, well, what's going on that you do dig? Well, I'm very grateful that there's a few projects I'm doing. Well, I have my own project. I've written all new music for it, and I'm starting to get the courage to play it out. It's wildly different than anything I've done. That's tough, but then I'm part of these projects that I'm really proud of. I'm not the writer, but the music is challenging and it's wonderful music. So for me, I'm like, okay, well, I could have decided personally, like, well, I don't know if you ever went through this. Like early on, you play the bar bands and you play the covers for $50, and that's a great thing to do. But if I never left that, if I never tried to evolve from that, I would right now be saying nothing is good.
Yeah, I
Personally,
mean, I when I was doing cover bands, like I was so miserable, I mean, like I was completely depressed and like usually when you
yes.
go on stage, like you're excited, even if it's a big, but like I've never been more unhappy playing music. So yeah, I understand what you're talking about, 100%. The other thing I wanted to ask you, are, playing the guitar, it gives us something, we can't explain. What would you say it is about yourself that, the guitar shows or emerges when you're performing that words can't? If you could maybe put that into words.
Another fantastic question. I kind of have this funny thing where I was always traditionally a very shy person. I didn't talk much, um, extremely nervous, social anxiety, um, and all these years, I kind of said to people, "Well, if you really want to know, watch and listen to me play." And they're like, "What does that mean?" I said it's just all there. I don't know. And like you said, I don't know how to explain it, but it's all there. It could be in my vibrato, it could be in the intensity or the chill of it or whatever it is. Um, and I tell some of the people I mentor, I said, you can reach inside of you to things nobody knows about you and draw on that, whether it makes you angry, whether it's, any kind of emotion. And you're right. It's not like a correlation between this sounds angry because something that sounds really angry to someone might be complete joy.
Yeah,
So
some people
I
think I think major sounds sad, but I think minor sounds
yes,
happy, as odd as that is. So,
well, that's because of context, right?
mhm.
I remember major seven chords when I first learned. Like, oh, what a corny happy chord, and now it can sound like a very dark, ominous chord to me. So it's not really quantifiable, but um, it's kind of like um, well, we have this thing where it's like and you may agree, just living life in the face of others is difficult. You might remember, like, I remember in high school, if you wore the wrong concert shirt, like of a band that wasn't cool, like that was a tough thing to do, right?
Yeah,
And
life's hard enough as it is, the day to day.
exactly. So, there's certain things I say to people, and I'm like, there's certain things we keep to ourselves. Like there's a few things there. You're the only one that's heard everything you've ever played. That's why you're such a bad critic. All the mistakes you made, like 7 hours a day, nobody heard those but you. So you're gonna be a little more critical. You also knew what your intentions were, but I do think that I do find these like kind of dopamine rushes. I think we've all experienced or heard people say, I've had that post gig adrenaline where you can't go to sleep,
Yeah,
right?
that's very common.
Yeah, but there's something to be said for that because I don't know if I've given a talk that kept me up and inspired all night, right? Or talked to somebody where I was like, wow, like music's done that to me. So something's going on there as far as expression that's not verbal. If
Yeah, I
that,
mean something's happening in the brain, which
Mhm.
I was also curious. You mentioned Satriani and Steve Vai and stuff. I'm also kind of curious. Inspiration from something that's completely unrelated to music. what inspires you to keep going or to play that's unrelated to music, would you say?
The last 7 years, I started studying one-on-one with a philosophy professor. And the reason I started it was in college, the best class I took was a class on rhetoric or, breaking down arguments, critical thinking. And I realized early on that kind of protected me. Like, you kind of define words. And so I found this guy and I said, I want to do Aristotle's rhetoric because I want to see what that's about. But in going through that, which took 6 months with him, I started to see how Aristotle, we're talking 300 BC, defined emotions, defined anger, and defined words like indignant. And as a musician, that would be when you get angry at the person that you think is not as good as you for getting all these gigs that you should have, but they don't have. And so I started working on that stuff like, well, I am indignant, but if I really think about it with like Aristotle's stuff, I'm not mad at the person because if I was that person, I would take that gig too. What am I mad at? Right. And so there are challenges, um, I'm very intensely into improving and playing music, but I do get discouraged and frustrated. And at times it's like, should I go on? Should I, and just like you were kind of mentioning, um, so I think studying all this great thinking, which is ancient, but pertains to today's life, and that's what this. His name's Dr. Gregory Sadler. He's super cool. He's a metalhead, actually.
Yeah,
And anybody,
one-on-one philosophy lessons. That's I've never heard of that before.
oh my God, yeah, look up Greg Sadler.
That's so
And
heavy. I mean, like that's I mean, I love philosophy too, and it's I didn't even know that, you know, you could do that. That's crazy.
yeah, and the great part about what he does, he's like my age, and he'll say we'll do a concept, and then he'll have me try to put in words how that would apply to say metal. So like we would do ethics, right? And so we would talk about maybe okay, here's utilitarianism, here's egoism, here's all these things. What would you argue for bands charging for a meet and greet?
Hmm.
Okay, stipulations, there's this. So we're taking, like, he often throws music at me or relationships within a band or Richie Blackmore or Dio or how they treat the fans or all this stuff. And I end up kicking around the concepts in a modern day thing. And that's helped me, even though I'll have my bad days where I'm just completely depressed and I'm like, I'm not going to go anywhere. I'm just not as good as my peers. I work with amazing musicians at Berklee. I mean, they're all so good. And I think the thinking part of philosophy and working stuff out has has definitely been its own adrenaline rush, but it's also kind of kept me in a happier place rather than resentment or envy or any of that stuff. It really put that stuff into check, and it helped me even become more compassionate, you
Yeah,
know?
you know, because some people will read philosophy and, you know, get so deep into it, they might go sideways, you know? But you're saying you're using it as healing in a sense, and that's, you know, that's amazing that it offers you that.
Absolutely. And I guess anger management courses these days are built on stoicism, like Seneca and all that stuff. They're still using concepts from like BC times, 300 BC. I think Aristotle and those people kind of nailed on how those emotions work. The reason he went through it in the rhetoric is if you can control somebody's emotions, you can control them, right? If you can make somebody angry, or if you can make them scared, or if you can make them, but it's a little deeper than that. But you end up reflecting on yourself, going, "Wait a minute, why am I responding like this?" And it got a lot of I'm still working on it. It's like music; it'll never end.
Yeah, we're always working on ourselves, I suppose, you know.
I am,
Eh,
like, I definitely am.
we hope everyone's working on on themselves, right? The other thing
Accountability.
I was also kind of curious because um, if you do you have any like pre-performance rituals, or are you superstitious about certain things, or sometimes like I know this might sound strange, but like if I'm playing a duo gig, like I have to check if I'm going to be on the right or left, which is going to
Oh yeah.
somehow change like anything like that you have you want to share?
Um, the side of the stage thing, I don't know if it's a superstition, but it's definitely something that I think it's funny you say you're going to find this odd, but I would say the same thing to you. You're going to find this odd, like, and even on some gigs, it's like, well, which side of the stage am I on? What does it matter? I mean, I think for this one, I should be on the right, like, and I feel like I sound like a crazy person, but rituals, like now, I try to um, really warm up before any performance because
Is it warming up like 10 minutes or an hour? Like what's the sweet spot you think?
well, first I do a series of stretches, which is really the most important. And then if I'm going to be standing up for the gig, I'll have the guitar on a strap and walk around. I really try to do an hour because when I was younger, I tried to just be like, I should be able to like walk right out there and do my best. And of course, that's ridiculous. And then you start to talk about like, you know, my text for Nuno Betancourt, and I said, "Does Nuno warm up?" He goes, "Oh man, he's walking around playing his solos at half speed, and then he's like for like an hour or two. Neil Sean the whole day from Journey, and and then John Norum, and then all Petrucci, and I'm like, oh man, what was this stupid thing when I was younger about this pride about like just going out and I couldn't do it, I'm like, it's by the fourth song I'm kind of ready, but
Yeah, I mean that's the thing about the road. It's just like you want to see where you are, but like you want to like be do the music as well as you can, right? Like and practicing, and that's the those that
yeah.
that's a sacrifice we make. Which brings me to I want to also ask you about you've done so much over the years and have dedicated so much of your life to teaching others and helping them finish their music college.
Mm.
What do you think the biggest sacrifice you've had to make overall, being a musician? What would you say?
Oh, interesting. You mean like music compared to life
Yeah,
experience?
well, I always kind of feel like when people, I'm like, I explain to people, I'm like, there's no Sunday brunches and stuff. Like, I mean, it just does, it's not happening. Like, I have to work, and
Yes.
I'm like, there's no Super Bowl type. This is
Right.
just not what it is. I mean, for a couple of years, I had like a regular gig on a Sunday at 5 o'clock. I had to get to Manhattan. I'm like, there's no, like, I have to get ready. Like, there's no Sunday. So stuff like
Right.
that, maybe I might be talking about.
Yeah, and I'm someone I'm not a holiday person at all. Like actually holidays kind of stress me out. Now that I'm older, um like one time Berkeley said, "Hey, over Thanksgiving will you go to Canada and do a series of master classes and stuff?" I go, "Yes." And the reason I got asked was because nobody else wanted to. They're like, "Oh, it's Thanksgiving," and I want to be playing. And to a degree, I had to come to terms with because I always thought there was something wrong with me, right? Because everybody's like, "I just love to lay on a beach for a week." I couldn't lay on a beach for an hour without getting panicked. I
Yeah.
can't. And then like to vacation unless I have a gig, it's very hard for me to go somewhere and just go there. And I'm like, I'm such a downer about it. I'm just like, what are we gonna do? Stay in a hotel room and go spend money at cafes and and it's like I'm not a sightseer. But if I'm gonna go somewhere like when I go to perform like in Europe, say, I love it because then you get part of the culture of the musicians, and that the culture is the part that I love, but the sightseeing and like lounging around. And after a while, I said to myself, you know what? There's nothing wrong with me. It's just I'm going to own it
Yeah,
because
that's who you are. I mean, it's there, everyone is different and in a way you know who you are. A lot of people are just kind of going through the motions of life.
that's a good
Those
point.
days.
Yeah, I didn't even think of it from that. That's a really good point about like a ritual. Like, some of this stuff is like very ritual. Like, like I played weddings for a while, like wedding gigs, because they paid great, but I saw how ritualistic that was. No matter what party it was, no matter what people, they all wanted the same songs, and everything was like I couldn't separate them because they were identical. They were set up identical. The food was identical. The songs that they wanted to play are identical. A lot of the first dances were identical. It's it was kind of like that's why you can step into any, like if I get a call for tonight, I can go play with a band I've never met anybody in because I know a lot of tunes and I have the experience and I know what to expect. It's not so there's that ritualistic part that makes me uncomfortable. Um, yeah, any kind of, I mean, besides, I would even say practicing is not ritualistic in the sense of what I'm working on or where I'm doing it or what time I'm doing it. It's not like punch the clock 9. I'd be no good at that. And I think it's interesting because there's some people that are probably more less anxious than me, right? But they're chill with what they're doing. Like I would see like neighbors, and on the weekend they would spend the whole weekend on their lawn, right? And I'm like, that's to them that's relaxing and that's cool. I'm like, I got gigs, and if I'm not practicing, I'm thinking about it. And what like sometimes one time I said to, and I'm sure somebody said this to me. Somebody says, but what about this and what about this going on here? And I said, I don't care what's going on out there. I care what's going on here. Meaning
Right.
my in, and it's really saved me from the madness of the world right now because going on Facebook is a scary thing. People are very angry. People are nasty, and actually, I don't care about any of that stuff. And it's not that I don't. It's not like a. I mean, I don't pay attention to it because what's important to me right now is being compassionate and playing music and sharing music with people or having discussions like this with other musicians. This is the kind of thing that interests me, I think.
No, totally. And it's almost, we create our own world and live in it, and and that's there's societal constraints in the world, and as artists, we kind of, break those in a sense. And that you talked about before, you wish you could get this type of gig, or wish you could go on tour with this person. And I mean, this might sound maybe a little like, I'm just kind of curious, have you ever personally reached out to any of the artists you've admired and said, I'm ready to work, like this is, I
Oh
mean, because
yeah.
really.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really awesome follow-up because I've worked with, I've been fortunate to work with legendary musicians, but that are not household names. Like on my last album, Tony Levin and Jerry Marotta were on 2 tracks. That's Peter Gabriel's band. And
Hmm.
of course, Tony Levin's played with everybody, and so has Jerry Marotta. And that was a rush playing with those people. But if I go to the average person, hey, who have you played with? Tony Levin, man. Tony Levin. And they're like, nah, who's that? But I always tell these people because I talk to them. They're in upstate New York, and I'm like, hey, listen, I know you think that Berklee's like an anchor. It's not. Like if Todd Rundgren needs a guitar player, if someone whoever that you play with needs a guitar player, I'm there because Berklee actually likes that. The more they could put on the resume for the school, the better. So, but I've reached out. I mean, when I was younger, I did things like, and this is pre-internet. I remember Richard Marx came out with an album in like '95 or something, '96, and I looked and I saw what the management was, and I went to the Yellow Pages. I called, I found the management, and somehow I got through, and some guy answered the phone, and he was Richard Marx's manager.
Wow. Wow.
And I said, "Can I overnight you some stuff because he just did this album? Does he have a band?" And I don't remember the gentleman's name, but he said, "Well, all but one guitarist." So I said, "All right, cool. Give me the address. I'm gonna make it to you." I did this with Amy Grant also because she had a new when people have a brand new album coming out, and then like my thing was I'll memorize the whole album and their greatest hits, and then I'm like I can present myself as ready to come out, right?
Yeah,
And
I mean, I've heard stories about that, so I was just kind of curious. Because I like let's say like Snarky Puppy, they needed you to play, like, but you'd have to like give up Berkeley for an extended period of time. Would that be a sacrifice you would make, is kind of like what I'm asking, at this point.
oh, I mean, yes, the only thing that could stop that was if I was financially incapable of doing it.
Right. Yeah.
Um, I'm sure I could take a leave from Berkeley, an unpaid leave, but if they're like, "Hey, man, you're gonna have to do this for like $50 a week," it's not about the money in the sense that, if it's not like I don't need, I would never say to somebody, you have to pay me this. Because remember, and I see this a lot with the younger generation, the money can get in the way, but when you're younger, I notice like I've tried to give some gigs to some younger players. How much does it pay? That's 75 bucks. I don't go out for less than 200. Well, there's more than money to a gig. There's contacts, there's the experience, I mean, forget it. And so
Yeah, I did 100 gigs for free playing before I even got paid $35 because I just wanted to, I'm like, to get in the space of, being in front of people.
I said yes to everything, and I don't remember. I'm sure they paid. I don't, maybe they didn't. I don't remember the money part of it. I remember you want to do this tour. It's going to be, Boston to Vermont to Philly to New York yep. I didn't ask anything. I just got in and I got in a van. We went from city to city and it was awesome. I mean, I don't think I paid for anything, but I don't remember if I got paid and I didn't care. I was on the road. I was playing clubs. And then the bass player liked me and got me on an album. And then the singer liked me and put me on, and I just think everybody said, what's the secret to, what you do? Nothing.
Yeah.
And I'm a big proponent of you cannot control success. You
Some of
cannot
it's just kind of pure luck in a sense too. Um,
100% of it is pure luck. And people will try to fight with me, but you can't control anything. You can't control an outcome. Like in the 90s, the big thing was I don't know if you ever heard of that book, The Seven Habits of Highly Effective People.
I haven't heard of that book, but I'll probably look into it now though.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like these people will sell false dreams to people, right? And you'll see it on YouTube all the time. The three things you need to know to, and it's who you know. It's not. I know a lot of big name people just because I've been around a while. That's all. And none of them have said, "Hey, here."
Right.
S and then sometimes, what was the story of that guy in the 90s? He wasn't even an active keyboardist, but he had some computer job and he got called for the Yes gig. He wasn't even active playing. So it's not, and he didn't know anybody. I mean, like he must have known somebody, but it's like I don't think when people are asked like famous actors or musicians, oh man, it's just hard work. You tell the thousand baristas in New York City that work their tail off that are madly talented, you tell them that
Yeah.
because they probably worked harder than you. And it's not, there's one thing that I do say to people, there's no formula for success. There's no, oh, well, people like the illusion of control. And, it's like social media, oh, this could happen. Well, that's what happens the least
Yeah,
is
we
people.
have no control at the end of the day, so it's just you might as well just live and, build, be happy and do what you want to do. But no, this is great, and I'm really glad we got a chance to reconnect. And I've always admired what you do and everything, and I can't thank you enough for taking your time today to speak with me about this. So just want to say
My
thank you.
pleasure. That was a great talk, man. Great questions. I love it.
Beautiful.
I love hearing about you too. That's
Yeah,
great.
beautiful. Well, I'm going to sign off and then we'll say a proper goodbye.
That was good. Take care.